and the GUI and a GUI show.
G2G.
Okay, I've gone live.
Hello.
Hopefully we are live. Hello everybody, welcome to the last Ruby KL and Penang meetup for 2020.
So that is GUI. I am Tristan, and below me is GUI.
Great. Okay, I'll quickly run through the keynote. But before that, yeah, are we live? Are we good?
We are live, yes.
Nice. Okay, so quick run through of the keynotes as per usual. Yes, so this round of meetup brought to you by Engineers NY for their sponsorship of StreamYard. We also have JetBrains sponsoring some Ruby Mine licenses. So we'll talk about it later towards the end of the event on how you can get your hands on a license. Join the Facebook group if you haven't. Most of the events are posted on Meetup, so definitely you want to follow us there as well. GitHub for some of our Ruby code. We use Slack for our day-to-day communication as well, so definitely join us there. And last but not least, we use Discord whenever we run a code clinic, so definitely join us there as well. Okay, so I think Tristan run through who we are already, so I think that's good. Right, if anyone joining us has any questions or any comments, always feel free to comment them in wherever you're watching this, either Facebook or YouTube or Twitch. We can always see all the comments, so yeah. I think Facebook, you have to do something extra where you have to let it have access to your profile. I think that's the only thing you need to do extra if you're on Facebook.
Well, it's optional, but if you don't allow accessing the profile, then we won't see in our interface who actually posted the comment. So if you want to be anonymous, then yeah, you don't allow it. But if you want your comment to be read, for example, and you want to know who it is, then it's best if you allow access to the name.
All right. If you want to remain anonymous, then it's fine.
Yes, it's not required.
Okay, so hiring shoutouts. I think Gui, you probably have one to run through.
So for hiring, Fort Ninja is hiring for backend developer for Ruby on Rails and also DevOps. Yeah.
Right. I think you posted.
Yeah,
Sorry,
do you
go
have
ahead.
a URL for this? Like,
I haven't have that. We are still working on that. After we have a career page, then we'll post it.
so I guess to contact you, just post a comment here, Facebook, send an email maybe.
Yeah. I think I posted before, so it's the same job post. Yeah.
Well, we'll probably post another reminder later on if
Okay.
anyone watching
Okay.
this is interested.
Yeah, it's definitely on Facebook and Slack as well. I've seen a few messages about it. But yeah. Okay, so this meetup, whoops, not moving. This time around, we're not having any talks, but rather you have to hear three of us go around and talking about things. So I think we can.
It's not just the three of us, but we can always have like people commenting as well. If you're interested and want to jump in, comment them out. If you're really interested, then we'll even bring you here onto StreamYard if you want. But it's going to be a discussion, less of a prepared talk, but more of like we have topics, talking points, and we get to talk about it amongst ourselves and amongst you as well.
Yeah, it's end of the year anyway, so well, let's just chill then. Okay. Right. So I think we kind of want to start off with a topic that sort of bridges from the hiring shout out earlier. I think you mentioned about hiring in 2020.
Yeah. So there's a lot of job posting for the 2020, and we saw there's also growth of company using Ruby on Rails. Just that in terms of talents, in terms of people that using and teaches Ruby, it's not that much in 2020, but I think it's also a good thing that Ruby 3 is coming out in December, so that it will spike some interest in terms of Ruby getting faster, right? So everyone is betting on Ruby 3 and seeing what's will be the next thing for Ruby. Um, and in terms of job opportunities and job prospect, there's a lot of work available. Like GitHub is still using Ruby, GitLab is using Ruby, and they are hiring remotely. So in terms of this kind of pandemic situation, um, remote work it's uh, it's the new norm. Basically, it's common, very common right now to hire people to work remotely. So I think um, if you know Ruby, you have an edge because you basically will get more jobs because like GitHub or GitLab, they are used to hiring remote developers.
But is it only GitHub and GitLab? Do you know of like other companies outside of Malaysia? Because I guess we'll talk about it as well. Within Malaysia, there's not a lot, but outside of Malaysia, is it still something that people are hiring for? I know like sometimes languages and frameworks are like a flavor of the week thing.
It's there's a few websites that do remote Ruby hiring. So there's rubyonremote.com. So that's also specifically hiring for Ruby developers remotely. Um, and
Uh,
Indeed,
and
Indeed.
I know Shopify is very clamped down to Rails as well. So that's one big company. I think I'm not sure was it this year, but I hope it's this year. But I think that I saw an article talking about the startups from Y Combinator and the languages they use. I think a lot of the more successful graduates from Y Combinator all use Rails as their initial platform. I think that included GitHub as well. I could be wrong here. I think this article was this year. I think.
Mhm. In terms of
But do you
hiring,
personally have a experience with like knowing people from like outside of Malaysia asking or hunting around? Because I remember there were a few, like maybe a couple of people who were asking me as well. Like these are my past connections, asking if I knew people for who knew Ruby. Um, so there are some, but how about you personally?
Not really on my
uh,
end.
Mm-hmm.
for me, hiring in Malaysia for Ruby developer is not common, um, but hiring in the US specifically and Australia,
Mm.
there's a lot because the ecosystem there is still, I think, there's a lot of Ruby communities and Ruby workshops, boot camps going around still,
So
and
how
also
would you how would you like compare then like the community, or not the community but maybe the tech culture, like are they more mature and so they would prefer more mature technologies than Malaysia? Are they actually backwards and then haven't actually progressed to the new things like Elixir or Go or whatever, just because they're large and so it becomes longer for everything else to catch up, and then it's only like in San Francisco, let's say, that the innovation is happening and everything else is lagging around? What would you say the reason why?
I think the culture is different and also the way they write their code is different. In Chicago, they do functional Ruby,
Mm-hmm.
so it's different from what we normally write Ruby, right? So they practice functional. And in Australia, I think it's still there's a lot of I think beginners kind of boot camps or code camps to train people know how to write Ruby on Rails. In UK, the Europe side, they do Sonic Pi. So there's a music application called Sonic Pi. It's basically code in Ruby, so you can tune your music live, um, and they do live performance
Mm-hmm.
using that. So that's also some of the schools put into their curriculum. So
Mm.
that's a different way of learning and practicing Ruby, I would say. So in real work, um, because now I think machine learning and data science stuff is getting more attention, basically. And when people talk about that, they first definitely will think about Python.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ruby still trying to get into those few. We have a few good libraries out there, just that need more people to use it. Um, and also, I think Kiba, if you've heard about one library called Kiba, it's basically an ETL library. Kiba. Yeah, Kiba, data processing and ETL framework. So that's
Mm-hmm.
also very, I think,
What
one
I
of the
don't
key
know
ones.
of a lot of companies that actually do training, for example, it seems to be that all of these new libraries you have to learn by your own.
Yeah.
You remember when Railscast was still there, then yeah, you get like new gems, for example, then you have a tutorial on how to do that. I haven't seen a really Ruby centric YouTube channel, for example, that would go through the new gems and break it down the way Ryan Bates used to do it. Ryan Bates was in the news again recently, by the way, because of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Digital Ocean thing. So that's why I
Yes, I
just
saw, I
remember that.
saw, I saw that.
Yeah. So it's not. It could be like it's becomes a chicken and egg problem where there's not a lot of creator and content being made, and so which feedbacks into less people getting interested because they don't know about like what's new or what's interesting in the
Mm-hmm,
world of
mm-hmm.
Ruby.
Correct, correct. Yeah, I think the content creation part is also one of the stuff that
Yeah.
lacking right now because a lot of the Ruby developers have moved on to senior position, right? So it's more work for them
Yeah. Well,
on
that's
certain.
actually something interesting. So that gives me an idea of maybe a possible future segment for the meetups is that we can just choose one of the newer gems that were made, and then we actually use it and then talk about it.
Yeah, that
Like
would be
let's
good.
say the Kiba would be good, for example. So we just do it, and then we do okay. This is how you create your Rails application, etc. So that might be good. So again, if people are interested in it, just let us know, and we'll probably do that as one of the segments. So it's instead of prepared talks, we can have workshops or like deep dives, gem deep dives, or basically discovery, code discovery, or those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some use cases so that people will make use of it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
think a
if
lot
that
of
will improve. Sorry, I don't know if that will improve the situation in Malaysia though, like, because will people still will start using Ruby because there are all of these gems. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
no worries. Yeah, I wanted to touch back a bit on the culture thing. So this is not a personal experience, but I know someone who moved to Canada, right, and they were interviewing in Canada. I forgot which region, but they told me that basically the interviews were all cookie cutter interviews from the US, right? I imagine everybody was using the same template as AWS or Google, something like that, right? So like if you prepared for one interview, you're sort of prepared for every interview. But it's a bit well, they told me it's a bit annoying because it's your standard whiteboarding, like, oh, how can you quickly sort this, and do you understand the tree, and what's the O end of this and that? But you studied for it. So eventually they got into a finance company that uses Ruby, uses Rails more specifically as a SRE. So yeah, like figuring out memory usage and that sort of thing. Talk to them quite a bit. So in terms of culture, I think like Malaysia is very different. Malaysia, every company interviews differently, regardless of stack. Right? At least in the West, there might be some companies that we just follow the tech giants because they obviously know better. But that's kind of like the cultural part I want to touch upon. I guess another thing I've been seeing and hearing more recently in Malaysia is there are a lot. I feel like the JavaScript, the usage of JavaScript has become more prevalent. So people are kind of like, JavaScript is everywhere. I can use one language for a lot of things. Maybe I want to start moving to that. And a lot of companies are hiring for JavaScript developers, right? Whether it's front end or back end. So maybe that might be a career change where don't really want to write Ruby forever. I want to see what's this JavaScript front end back end. Maybe that's kind of like encouraging people to explore. other languages. But
Yeah.
but Trishan, I'm curious from a
Yeah.
from a services point of view, right? Because you're working in a services company.
Mhm.
Like, are there a lot of changes or projects? Changes in project languages, or it's like still the same?
So that's the thing. Because I am in a long-term engagement with a client, so I'm not really able to monitor. That's why I was also interested in Gui and his experiences, because I'm not that familiar. Um, I don't really, aside from some of the friends that have been asking me, like, can you point me towards some Ruby developers? That's the only thing. So I can't really answer your question there.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's less of a, what's the word to use, hype around Ruby. Like,
Well, it's. I guess it's because of the maturity as well. That's why I was asking if it's because it's mature, or it's like because it's just left behind. So we're not sure. Like, we don't see a lot of hype on Java, although we do know that there's a lot of work in Java. There's not a lot of talk. Well, I mean, C++ is getting back in the business because of like all the new updates on C++, but C++, these are all still uh, big languages that have their own like momentum, right? But you just don't hear about it. PHP, people probably don't like. There's a new PHP version, by the way, which is not backwards compatible. I think it's PHP 8. You can still see a lot of people working with PHP. It still like is one of the bigger languages, but not a lot of. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not looking for it, but I don't see a lot of job advertising on PHP. Maybe I'm just not in the correct groups, right? But you do see a lot of the hot languages hiring. There's Elixir, Go, Rust, JavaScript, all of its flavors, etc. So maybe it's just about visibility, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, even for me, like on a more personal note, right? Like the whole reason I kind of dive into this Ruby community and actually finding a job writing Rails is like, to me, was the community. Like I started out like getting Aaron Pedersen Tenderlove like recommended in my YouTube feed. And, wow, this guy gives talk. It's quite funny. Okay, I watched more talks, and then I got introduced to more people like Sandy Matz and all of like the whole Ruby community. Right, this is like interesting for language this long, and the principle that Matt's hold when designing the language, I thought was like very interesting, which I started getting more involved into Ruby KL, and now I'm here, have a job actually writing in Rails. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The job prospect and stuff like that. I think for Ruby likes to um, basically experiment. So Ruby is the language itself is very flexible. You can do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stuff with it. That's why you can experiment your theories around what you think about things should work.
It's also that's also a double-edged sword, because the more flexible the language is, the worse it is at scaling in terms of team, not in terms of like the actual operations, but the team, because now you get because now it becomes the style becomes very personal to the team, compared, for example, to something like Java, where it's very verbose, but it's very strict in terms of its like how you do things. And so
Mhm.
it becomes easier to scale in terms of teams, because usually you'll have something like a code architect saying, okay, these are your interfaces, code against them, and then you have like a flow chart, and then basically everyone else is just implementing these things. Not a lot of space there to be creative and flexible, but you do get a lot like huge uh, portions of work done, because you can just like partition them out. Okay, you need to create an API to connect to this and give me an answer. And then for this team, you need to process this particular thing. So everything is separated out, and then everything gets merged back together, because everything is not that flexible, everything fits together. You don't care like whether the code style for this particular portion is fine or not. As long as you're working with the interface, then everything is still going to work, right? And so it becomes a double-edged sword in that case.
Yeah, agree with that. So sometimes that is basically get things done faster or efficient in terms of Java. There's a lot interface. In terms of Python, there's also things like indentation, right? We need to enforce that. In terms of Golang, there's also a certain way to write it. Um, for Ruby, it's basically a very creative. It up to your creativity to use it. Like that's why we have like a lot of other languages branch out from Ruby, like
Mm-hmm.
Crystal for static type, Elixir. It's Ruby like, but it's not Ruby. And yeah, so there's much more to explore in terms of the creative way to how to um, write a programming language,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you sacrifice the performance and also the how to say the style, the code style
Mm-hmm.
on what's supposed to do when you do this job. There's a lot of ways to do it, 100+ ways to do it, but in other language there's one or two ways to do it. So it's, yeah, um,
Mm-hmm. And I guess the more experienced you are, then the better your decisions be in a flexible language. Because for example, if you need to do it in Java, yeah, exactly. There's like only one way to instantiate, like, or there are recommended ways, and very few recommended ways to go to create like a circular buffer. Let's say a type circular buffer of integers or something like that. But in Ruby, you have like, will I do it as a queue and then just have it simulate a circular buffer, or you actually just do an array and then you just like uh, have a pointer or going around it? So there are different ways of doing it, but um, I, that's again the double-edged sword, is that it becomes a personal style or a team style, and it's
yeah.
not necessarily dictated by convention. And I think that goes segues into like an interesting question that you mentioned when we were backstage, is that we have all of these um, like hiring posts with like good compensation, but not a lot of people are actually applying. Like, you had some thoughts about this as well.
Yeah, because that's thing saw a few times already. People posting more than 10K compensation, like
Yeah,
asking
but
junior developers to take up the challenge and apply. Right? Um, and there's no
sorry,
news.
take up a challenge. What kind of challenge is this?
Basically, take the interview. Just go for that
Oh,
interview.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
but I haven't heard any news about
So is
that.
that like, what do you think? Is that like a lack of people? People are just afraid, or are is it too low? Like, is that offer too low, and all of the Ruby developers are like basically getting better compensation, not in terms of monetary amount, but more in terms of benefits. Like, they're happy with what they have right now, not necessarily in terms of like the amount, but also with the people they're working with, the benefits, etc. So, what do you think is the issue there?
I think most likely they want to explore other things that they are currently doing. Like you work
Mm,
on certain things for maybe 2 to 3 years. You want to try something different that relates to your interest, but it's slightly different. Different.
but is
So
that why people are not applying for these like lucrative job posts? Especially when people are saying, "Oh, I'm the country, sorry, the economy is shrinking and we're losing jobs." And yet you see all of these posts like hiring quite like, I wouldn't say
yeah, yeah.
it's really high, but like quite generous amounts of compensation.
In terms of the job post that I posted, right? So I have a few applicants who are applying. Those are not experienced developer. Basically, they when they apply, they have zero real
Mm-hmm.
experience. They want to just try this position. For the senior one, I also get one applicant who are senior. He doesn't want to be a full time. He basically just want to like be
Mm,
a part time because he already have a
I
few
see.
companies.
So the problem is the middle. So there's no middle class in a sense.
Yeah, there's
That you
no
either
mid
have
level.
like the you have the beginners, and you have the senior experts,
Yeah.
and what the offers are middle, like basically middle
Yeah.
class, and there's
Yeah.
it's not a fit because you either hire juniors and offer a junior salary, but if you offer like let's say 10K, right, then you have a certain expectation of seniority, but then the juniors won't fall into there, like the people who are
Yep.
basically beginners. But then also 10K is probably not enough for people who are really senior
Yes.
experts and domain experts in their fields, because that's going to be too low, and they're already like raking in something much better than a 10K. And so I guess this is like the pipeline somehow stopped, and we're in this situation where uh, companies probably are looking for that mid-tier developer, like the Goldilocks thing, where it's not too expensive, not too senior, not too cheap, not too junior, but just right. But then the just right basically doesn't, it's not there, like, because
Yeah.
the pipeline stopped somehow. Uh,
Yep.
the people, I guess this ties into the people who you were saying trying different things. The people who would have fit in the middle perfectly switched midway. Maybe they thought, okay, maybe I should just do Node.js after 3 years, because 3 years would have been like just a great time to like transition into something more middle. Like you
Mm-hmm.
know enough, and you can like specialize on some things. But then you switched midway, and so yeah, we lost that particular train. Is that accurate?
Yeah, somehow, yeah, I think so. Because yeah, um, we don't have candidates that's like 1 year to 2 years in terms of experience, right? Most of them are just basically zero. They come from other background. They want to try, and people that already work in Ruby on Rails, they want to try other stuff because they think that why not, right? Still young, can just try
Mm.
out what's possible out there, right?
There's probably also less to lose, because um, if you're already like 15 years doing Ruby on Rails, well, not maybe not Ruby on Rails, but like as a developer, and then you end up with Ruby on Rails, so that you still have that kind of experience.
Mhm.
It's going to be difficult to switch to a new language that you're not as familiar with, and so you're not as productive with, while still commanding that kind of salary. Like you, at least I would feel guilty, like asking for this amount when I know I'm not going to be as productive if I just used whatever language I'm comfortable with. So
Yeah.
people who just got like 2 3 years of experience switching midstream, uh, it's not it's not as big of a deal, because you're just like a beginner anyway, but you just have more, let's say, experience in terms of dealing with the soft skills, and then everything else is just like, okay, these are just languages. It's like syntax or different ways of deployment or different paradigms, etc., but it's still programming in the end. But your experience of dealing with teams, doing like plans, doing specs, is like something that brings you towards that particular level of salary or seniority.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Agree with that.
Mm.
And that's also one of the, I think one of the um, precious stuff where when you deal with Ruby itself, it allows you to easily prototype, right? Compared to other languages. If you do
Mm-hmm.
Spring Boot, basically like Java, you need to build each of the modules yourself. That will be
Mm-hmm.
time consuming. So a lot of
Well,
people start with Ruby on Rails. It's fast,
yeah,
and then
so these things though, there are a lot of, like, especially on the Go side, like there are a lot of things that the typed languages or the compiled languages are doing that are bringing the flexibility of Ruby on Rails. I mean, I understand you're saying that you can easily prototype things because it's very flexible, right? But like for example, proto buffers are something that we I think I presented on Ruby Tuesday. I forgot if I ever did, but there was something on proto buffers, which is code generation. So this is the new way. Instead of code flexibility, you just specify parameters this is how the code should look like, and then it generates the code for you. And that becomes fast because now you're describing how the API looks like, and then you just let the code generator deal with it for you, and it just creates it correctly. Like it's standard. You don't have to care about like code review, etc. You just need to care about the description of that thing, and that's how they're trying um, to supplement their being rigid. It's still rigid, but now they get the benefits of flexibility of what you're saying of Ruby on Rails of that
Yeah.
fast prototyping thing.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I think that's okay. Makes sense.
And so you mentioned like so we mentioned about the middle class being gone, like, and we also at backstage we mentioned about like Next Academy probably having a hand in this, because we had a few people who are not very beginners but more like good juniors graduating from Next Academy, and we have hired. And
Mm-hmm.
it could be that um, when they switched from teaching Rails to something else, and then yeah, that's when the supply of good middle class, well, eventually who will be middle class right now or mid mid tier right now would have been, they just dried up. It's like the
Yeah.
one child policy. Like they just realized after preventing people from reproducing is that okay, now we don't have the like this particular age is missing in the demographic, right?
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Yes, the that generation, there's one
Mm-hmm.
generation that progress is missing. Yeah. So now we have more seniors.
Mm-hmm.
Will be
It,
there.
it could it could be a timing thing as well. Not really related to like COVID timing, but more of like when they were when like Energia reaches like 2-3 years, like in the mid tiers, like they're contemplating their career, right? Probably that's when like, oh, there's a lot of job, like sudden burst of Go jobs, for example, sudden burst of
Mm-hmm.
JavaScript or sudden burst of Rust jobs or whatever. It's like, okay, this is booming, right? Maybe I can go and take a look, right? It's probably now that it's probably more of like Ruby being matured and people are like, and it's always there. It's not like a booming thing, right? So people are like not really paying attention to it. Could be.
Yeah. And hopefully Ruby 3 will bring back that hype again where
Mm-hmm.
promise a lot
Are people
actually. Ruby
are
3 does.
people do you know people excited about Ruby 3?
I only know
Um,
Ruby people who are excited about Ruby 3.
Yeah.
I know
Oh.
there's one researcher actually. He is a Java programmer. He's looking into Ruby to study his master. So he's also looking into Ruby 3. So I think in terms of research, Ruby somehow it's one of their interests to to, to do coding research stuff.
But do you know personally people who are excited with Ruby 3? Like Ruby is like they okay,
Uh,
maybe trying things out.
Here, not much though. In Penang, it's
Mm-hmm.
not much because um, most of them already switched to other platform,
Mm-hmm.
frankly, especially to JavaScript because now front end is most likely JavaScript. So
Mm-hmm. And then so they write the backend as well in JavaScript.
they switch to other stuff, basically serverless or Firebase, so that they
Mm-hmm.
don't really have to maintain a backend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's more on the UI side. Um, that's different, I think. But PHP still a lot
Yeah.
somehow, still a lot.
Like
Yeah,
yeah, I guess the recommendation there is if you really still want to be um, relevant, is to always it's just like learn PHP, be productive on it, such that if all other languages somehow stopped hiring, you still have some like a way to make a living, right? Like you're,
yeah.
it's never going to have a problem hiring. You're
The
always going to
digital
have jobs in
asset
PHP.
platform here, Synergy, is actually a PHP platform.
Mm-hmm. Well,
They,
PHP is not a bad language. I mean,
yeah, it's,
It has difficulties, so it's the same issue with being flexible. Is that you if you, it's too flexible and you learn bad habits, then it reflects on the code base.
Yeah.
Same with PHP, it has a lot of inconsistencies which cause you to make bad habits or make bad style, which tends to be error prone.
Mm-hmm.
But they are making, like, the strict mode, for example, is like one of the bigger things in PHP, where
Yeah.
it standardized a lot of the way you write code, because if it doesn't run in strict mode, then that means you're playing loose with the PHP compiler. It would be fine for scripts, but not for like a large project, right? And
Yeah.
the later versions of PHP like basically refine all of these things.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. I think there's also in terms of conference, right? There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of online conference for 2020, right? So one of which is Railsconf, which is free for all
Mm-hmm.
this year, 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
Ruby
search it
Kaigi
on,
was sorry, yeah, Railsconf on YouTube. Sorry,
yep,
you were
if you
saying?
search it on YouTube, the full playlist is there.
Mm-hmm. And there was the Ruby Kaigi takeout something.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
was Ruby Kaigi is like the annual event in Japan or something, with the Rails core committers um, doing presentations, and I guess they did it online this year as well.
Yep. Yeah, there's quite some English talks there as well. So yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
And what's good as well is because if it's in YouTube, then you can do like the automatic translation of captions, and it kind of works. So it's not as bad as attending it live and just waiting for like translations or something, right? So it's actually, it democratized the event. It allows people who does not necessarily speak the speaker's language to also understand what's happening. Do you know of any
Mm-hmm.
other online events that the bigger ones for Ruby?
I joined, not joined, but I attended. I watched more talks as well, but they're different languages. So RubyConf China, surprisingly, is on YouTube as well. If anybody's
Mm-hmm.
interested in Mandarin. Another one I sort of catch up on was hold on, let me take a real quick look. Was Kaigi Rails Kaigi, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Kaigi on Rails, yeah. So because they're online this year, I watched some of the talks. Although they are like in Japanese, so that's another language barrier, I guess. But these are available. Like previously, I wouldn't even think about flying to attend these talks, right? But now they are all online. I'm just like, yeah, I'll casually listen to them.
I didn't know about China Ruby. I think China is standardizing on Go, I think, right? Like Go is quite popular in China, but
It
not in Ruby. I didn't know
depends.
about
It
that.
depends. I know that, for example, recently, what was the company? Tencent, I think maybe. I could be
Mm-hmm.
wrong here, but there is a huge tech company in China where they actually have standardized platform on how you build things, like everywhere from all the way from like how they structure Scrum teams all the way to building things. And I think they focus very heavily on that platform using Java and Kubernetes. So yeah, I don't think necessarily they are like focusing on one language. I guess it comes out to same like us. Maybe depends on what their use cases and all.
But there's a Ruby community in China, because otherwise you can't do a conference if there's no community, right?
Yeah. They even invited Mats for keynote. So
Mm-hmm. Did Mats actually go? Oh, he went.
no, it's an online event. So he recorded his talk.
Okay, so
Yeah,
he doesn't have to fly.
I think in 1 year he actually did attend. I think probably one of the past years he did attend
Mm-hmm.
a RubyConf China keynote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you know which part of China was the main organization? Like which
No idea.
province?
No idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. I was hoping for Singapore to have an online um, Ruby, like the Red Dot Ruby, to be online as well, but I guess that didn't happen. That would be nice. And also well, it's not a conference, but our meetups have transitioned to fully online. I think this year was the first time Penang KL and Ruby KL communities actually combined, since we are now doing online anyway. We used to. I remember there was a time when we used to present at Penang, KL, because you were doing live streaming, right? Penang, KL meetups. And so we will some Jimmy and I would sometimes present at Penang, KL because we don't have to fly over to Penang to present. And you've been doing online presentations, like online meetups, for quite some time. And of course, the Corona thing forced Ruby KL Ruby to also do online, and then that we just realized we're doing both online anyway, so might as well do the community like
Yep, yep.
online.
To get more people together,
Yeah.
right? To share knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if we separate, then our group is more more work need to be done, right? On this. So we share resources.
I'm just curious, like, are there any other meetups happening elsewhere in Malaysia? Because I'm not very familiar with the non-English groups and communities, so I'm not really part of them. So I don't know. Maybe they are doing meetups.
In KK, I think Kota Kinabalu,
Mm-hmm.
there's Ruby initiative there under Rambutan Code. Um, how far they go, I'm not sure. Faizra is there, so
Mm-hmm.
she's one who kickstart the Ruby group there. Um,
Because
yeah,
starting next year, we can have like three, Penang, KL, and KK,
yeah,
like
yeah,
doing the thing. That
yeah.
will be interesting as well. So like just probably one of the like the silver linings of this pandemic is that people are stuck in their houses, but people are also able um, to gather virtually, like more easily, because it became like it's not a second-rate citizen anymore. Like okay, it's a virtual meetup. They probably couldn't afford the venue or something, like, or like maybe this is a small event, and so it's not going to be as fun. So you used to be that those were the perception for a virtual event, but now it's like because everyone has to do it, then it becomes like okay, a necessity, and becomes more accessible as well, in a sense.
Yeah, definitely yes.
Yeah.
So if any one of you are listening, watching, know about any virtual conference, you can put in the comment section.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also one conference that I've been to recently called Jom Launch. Um,
Jump
got the
launch.
tickets.
Yeah, that we've been talking about that in our podcast. Like it's like a month. We always say, okay, there's jump launch, jump launch. What exactly is this?
So the guy has been doing Jom Launch very long time ago. So basically, it's a group of people where they allow startups, entrepreneur to present their idea, their stack, and the concept of their business or the
Mm-hmm.
tech. So basically, developers are talking and also presenting what's to offer in terms of their offer. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of startup actually started out off from Jom Launch to get investors or getting traction starting there. The event is really good. They use Air Meet, um, which is I think that's the best conference so far I've been to.
Mm-hmm.
No lagging.
Airmeet is the one that tries to emulate seating, right? Where you have
Yes, yes,
tables, and then you
yes,
actually have to sit on the table, and you can't talk to anyone else other than the people in your table. And you have
yes,
someone, and you can move tables, of course, and but
correct,
there's only a limited seating capacity for a table or something.
correct.
So it's a
And
very
then
interesting point.
yeah, and the presentation mode is good. Like there's no lagging, there's no hanging. Everything is smooth, and the program flow they plan it very well. So it's more on people interacting with each other, and those developers are very passionate about what they're presenting. And during that job launch, I also saw two talks about Phoenix. Basically, they use Elixir. There's
Mm-hmm.
um, I think two startups are using Elixir during that event. So it's very surprised, like, well, actually we have people launching products with Elixir. So they are still
Well,
new.
yeah. So you say you're surprised people are launching on Elixir. Is it
Mhm.
because it's a very
It's a very
new
small group.
language?
Yeah,
Okay, it's
it's a
just very
very
small.
small group in Malaysia. Not much people um, writing or practicing Elixir. I think that previously there's a Elixir meetup, right, in KL.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anything new.
It's probably what happened with Mind Valley as well with the Rubyist before they switched to Elixir. I think they just hired all of the Elixir developers now, so there's no sense to do a meetup. That was a joke, at least when I was there, that it's very difficult to have a Ruby meetup because everyone attending the meetup is from Mind Valley when that time. So it's probably what. Well, anyway, but there used to be a few like Fave. Mind Valley is doing Elixir, but I'm also surprised when you're saying that Elixir is um, being used because I wouldn't think of Elixir as a first or as an MVP framework or language just because it's too new, so there's not a lot of automated
Mhm.
like automation and or like best practices under it.
Yep.
Deployment is still a tricky thing. For example, especially if people are going for Docker now, Elixir. I mean, last I found last I know about it is that it's quite difficult to do the. Uh, I forgot what Elixir was famous for. The beam thing, where you like it's like the infrastructure. Basically, it's you can kill parts of the stack or like have the network uh, split, but everything is still working until everything
Mm.
gets reconnected. Doing that under Docker, for example, is still quite complicated. Usually, you won't do it like the beam thing outside of Docker. So it's quite new, and like you said, it's quite surprising.
Yeah, and the workload on that, they show the benchmark. It's, I would say, interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, again, like I said, it's not. I'm not saying that Elixir is not good. It has its place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying it's not. I'm not used to seeing it as an MVP because usually for the initial products you want flexibility.
Yep.
Uh, Although Elixir is quite flexible, but usually people will transition into Elixir once they determine uh, that they do need the throughput because the model for Elixir it's very good with these kinds of asynchronous operations just
Yes.
due to how
Yes.
it's designed, right? But usually you will only know that once your product has grown a bit, unless you specifically will target that from that like this is your MVP like high throughput thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
usually it's not the case. Like usually you start off with like maybe 10, 15 customers, build your product around it, and then your customers grow, and then a year or two later you realize, okay, I have 100 customers now. um, they are and I'm still like on a small server or like a very small space
Mm-hmm.
cloud environment, and then I need to squeeze more performance out of uh, my stack. And so usually
Yeah.
people will either buy more cloud resources or change stacks into Elixir so that they can make the most of the use of the hardware, right? But yeah, I'm
Yep.
not used to having it as the initial language for MVPs
Mm-hmm.
for a startup.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, because you want to change things quick, like, right? You
Yeah.
don't
It
necessarily.
would make more sense for me, for example, if it's like what you said, JavaScript and Firebase, because that's like quite big flexibility. Of course, the downside there is that you're beholden to Firebase. Like
Yeah.
it's Firebase is expensive. When you grow, you have to pay more and those things, and maybe that's when the time you realize, okay, I need a backend server that I can control the costs for or something. But
Mm-hmm.
that's very flexible, and usually that's what many startups will use. You need
Yep. To
something
bootstrap.
to be shown to the user, and
Yep.
backend is
Correct.
like something that you just need to work. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It doesn't need to be super cheap, but it doesn't have. But you don't want it super expensive, for example. And so that Firebase ticks a lot of the boxes there.
Yep. Agree. Agree. Yeah. In terms of other events, tech events, not sure. Other.
Is there
That's
going to be
right.
a launch party for Ruby 3.0? Do you know?
I think
Oh.
I saw a Compass link somewhere, but I think that's in like Japan. I'm not sure about anywhere else.
Yeah, because I think they are like there are going to be uh, not launch parties specifically, but like at least people watching and then doing reporting and like I don't know. Again, I haven't found a lot of YouTube channels that actually cover Ruby. Maybe this is a chance for people, right? Like bring back the thing, and I
Yeah,
already mentioned that might be
it's
something
a
we can do.
needed niche, right? Yeah.
Mhm. So I don't know if that's being covered. If there's an actual um, like coverage online for the launch of Ruby 3.0. So I
Yeah.
remember before on conferences, some people will talk about the gem and do the release, like the rake release on like during the conference itself. Like that's the actual release of the gem, right? So some people will do that. I've seen gems being released like that. So that would be an interesting thing as well if they do that on for the launch of Ruby 3.0 to actually seed the download servers with the binaries or like the source code or something, or maybe the commit that removes the preview tag from the version. So that would be an interesting milestone as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. Shall we talk a bit about 3.0 since we're there?
Yeah.
Yep.
When was the last release? So the last one is 2.7, right? We
Correct.
don't have a
Last
2.8.
year. Yep.
Mm. And then so we basically don't have 2.8, we don't have 2.9, goes to 3.0. I remember one of the headlines of 3.0 is 3 by 3 by 3, I think.
I think it's just
Like,
3 by 3.
is that
Yeah.
3 by 3?
It
Oh, yeah,
should be.
3 by 3.
Yeah.
Where it's 3 times faster than 2.0, basically.
Correct. Yep.
Is that does this on a certain benchmark? But does it actually? Do you know if it actually like fulfilled its promise?
I think
I
it,
think based on what I've seen so far, I think it was an article in Fast Ruby IO. I think the benchmark they used was the Super NES emulator. I think that was the benchmarking guide. It wasn't exactly 3 times faster. I can't remember the exact number, but it was definitely faster, just not 3 times faster.
Do you know of specific improvements to Ruby that allowed it to be faster?
They definitely improved the just-in-time garbage collection, but I don't exactly know the details. There are some improvements stated in the changelog. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you want to do you want? Can anyone like present the changelog? Maybe we can take a look at these things and then we can see. We can comment on them as well.
let me see if I can find it.
Are you sharing your screen? Oh yeah, you're sharing
Yep.
your screen. Still a preview one. This is like what 2 months ago. What happened to preview two? Or
I
they
don't think
don't
there's a preview
like they
too.
know it's they already know
It's good enough.
like this is yeah, like just a few bug fixes. No, I think they're supposed to have another preview because they did say at the bottom that like there's going to be another preview, I think.
Yeah, I don't see in the full release version release because
Well,
after this
not
was 272.
yeah, but if you go to the blog post, for example, you like the 3.0 preview when released, right? And go to the end of the document, it does say something about um, yeah, trailer.
Oh,
They
preview
have
2
a trailer.
trailer. Stay tuned.
So, but it's not released. So it says stay tuned, but it doesn't. I haven't seen news about this.
Yeah, same here as well. Yeah, I guess we
Alright,
can
so
kind of go through. Yep.
I think Gui from Penang said he looked at a few of these things. Maybe you can walk us through some of some of the releases here,
So
features.
one of the stuff on the preview is the reactor. So I see the reactor yeah, reactor. So this one is I think this is, although it's experimental, this is one of the effort to go into concurrency. So from what I read, it's more like a JavaScript-like asynchronous um, way of doing concurrency. So basically, pass in and it's non-block. Is it blocking?
No, I think it's non-blocking because it's not under the same thread. But it uses the actor model under its fundamental abstraction.
Can you scroll down a bit for the code sample? What is it? Oh, this sounds like it's like multi-threaded. The way you do multi-threaded. Wait, no.
Let me open up the Rector document. Maybe that might help.
Yeah.
So this is
2.7.
in Ruby master. Yeah, it does run in parallel. Each rector can have oops. Each rector can have one or more thread. Let's see, to communication.
Ah, no, this is modeled on the Go channels.
Yeah,
You do message
it's
passing
actor.
to-
Yeah, especially faster.
Yeah, so
So
it's
it's
modeled
a
on the
immune.
Go channel thing because the only way for reactors to communicate with each other is through sending messages.
Yep, sending messages.
Yeah, it's the
Like
actor
in
model.
Go, for example, you have a pipe, and then the way can only communicate between channels through that pipe.
Yeah, so the one of the main motivations is for it to be help in writing thread safe programs, right? But they're getting some caveats here and all. But I'm seeing a lot of hype on Rectors. A lot of people are talking about it. Even Mike Perham, the creator of Psychic, he's like, yeah, I'll look into it once it's out. Like if Psychic can use this, will really improve it. Yeah, there's some very early benchmark in Fast Ruby IO on Rector. I think someone actually even wrote a web server using Rector. And it's like, yeah,
possible,
let's
like
look at the performance.
Rails would have like instead, like Puma might, for example, might switch to Raptors for its multi-threaded mode, because Puma has like multi-process and multi-threaded, right? And so that it can handle both use cases. So it's possible that those rack servers can do Raptor.
But again, this is like very early, I think, because they explicitly said it's experimental, but with everybody talking about this, I think, like with everybody's involvement and making this better, I think, yeah. Sorry, good.
Yeah, for Ruby 3, there's also a Falcon framework for web server.
Falcon uses the other approach, right? I think they the author specifically like wanted to try something else.
Yes.
What was his method of implementation?
Because I remember Ruby 3 also emphasis on Falcon.
Or maybe Falcon is trying to use Ruby 3.0 specific stuff, like the new stuff from Ruby 3.0. Is that it?
I don't think so. I remember his implementation was there was a very specific thing he wanted to, like it's based on a very specific implementation. On top of my head, I can't remember what it is.
Okay. I think we skipped RBS. Gui, do you know what RBS is?
So it's, as far as I'm aware, it's a type system for Ruby. It's quite similar to what's the one Stripe is using right now? Sorbet. Yes. Yep.
Sorbet.
Mhm.
But yeah, I remember like when Mats was giving talks about this, he was very interesting because Mats is dry, right? He doesn't like repeating, and he says that type systems are quite literally not dry. You have to repeat this a lot. So But I'm not sure actually how many people is gonna implement this. I guess for bigger apps like RBS kind of makes sense, but I don't know. I'm on the
It
fence on
does,
this.
so type systems does do away with certain classes of unit tests, because instead of the unit test confirming that you're passing in the correct values, for example, for this function, and you can handle the edge cases. Like if you're saying, okay, this method adds 2 integers, what happens if you add 2 strings, and you actually have error handling for that, right? But type systems, like, you don't have to even write the test whether it can handle a string if you're going to add 2 integers, because it's not going to allow you to, it's just basically going to flag you that this is not, the way you did the type system um, it's not allowed. And so it is not dry, but for certain cases, I would say the unit testing is handled by the type system. It's a different way of looking at it. Like, instead of your unit testing handling inputs and how you respond to it, in terms of like types, you just bake in the unit test into the type system of your program, and then basically your unit test deals with the behavior, or like what is the output given these inputs, and not the error conditions, for example, of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely
But does
agree.
this
Yes, users.
does RBS, because sorbet is optional type system, so it's actually on a separate file, but you still write like normal Ruby. This changes the way you write Ruby, just like how you would write TypeScript, I guess. It does change. It's still JavaScript, but it changes the way you write JavaScript. So does this make it so bad inputs or bad typing causes the program to error out? Is that the case?
I definitely think it's a separate file, uh, but I'm not sure on like I
But
really
you can see
didn't.
the post definition is here, for example, or is this like a C header file?
I think it's
where
just
you have
like a header. What's the word to use here? Definition. Just like, hey, this takes in this input, this returns.
So it's like a C
Yes.
header file then. Gui, do you know what I'm talking about? The C
Yeah,
headers?
it's basically an interface where people,
Mm,
when you inherit the library, you will know what points
interesting.
that you.
Yeah.
So it's like a
Okay.
schema.
Yeah, so
is
I
it?
guess, yeah, I would think of it as a unit testing replacement for a certain class of unit tests.
Yeah, I think for bigger apps it will help a lot, especially like we talk about multiple teams working on Ruby, right? So I think this would help with that. Like, oh, this method takes this and that just by looking at the RBS file.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I
So
guess
we
this
talked about
RBS.
Raptor.
Raptor. Yeah, scheduler. I didn't look up much into this actually.
That's like 2 features on concurrency now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Fiber. Okay, so I yeah, just remembered. So Falcon is using the fiber way of doing things. It's also IO async, but it's using the fiber way rather than using the actor way.
Mm. Okay.
okay. What about the other notable new features?
Right
This
word
is
assignment.
interesting. The right word assignment is actually quite interesting. Do you know how this works? So the usual
yeah.
assignment is like you assign it to the left, right?
Yep.
Like A equals 10, for example. But in this case, it becomes 10, or like a method, you assign it into the variable on the right. That's why it's an arrow. Like, take the result of this, put it into the right. So it becomes easier to read, I guess, because instead of putting in the container of this value, you immediately go into the function that creates the value, and then the variable that it's stored in is an afterthought. So it's this is quite, I mean, there are certain classes of methods and functions that would benefit in this reverse order. We probably need to read about the whole discussion on the Ruby commit I think they use track or something. I forgot on the mailing list. But yeah, this will be interesting to find out what were the use cases for this.
Yep. Endless method definition.
I don't know how to use this. I usually don't do recursive stuff, so yeah, probably
I
not.
guess is it like
One-liner.
yeah, it's like you don't have to write an end.
So this one is similar to JavaScript, right? Basically,
I believe so.
But why is it called endless definition?
so
You don't have
you
to.
don't have to end with the N, E-N-D.
You do,
Hello?
so it's not a recursion thing. Okay, I thought
No.
it was a like infinite method definition. Like okay, I'm probably going to
Endless.
it's endless. Okay, because the way you would use this, the way before right now with 2.7, for example, you would have like a semicolon and then end semicolon at the end if you wanted a one-liner, right?
Yep.
So now this is just like okay.
Equal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like JavaScript. You just equal the
Yeah,
function equal.
yeah. Mm-hmm. But you still have to define it, I guess. It's still not like in JavaScript where everything is a variable, like
Yeah.
everything is const whatever or let whatever or var whatever, and then whatever comes in is either a function or a value, right? But here you have to specifically and explicitly define it as a method, and then you put equals afterwards. Okay, yeah, I now I get what it means by endless, not a recursion thing. Okay, sorry.
Right. Find pattern is added.
It's not very clear from the example, I guess.
Yeah.
What is the pattern?
X.
Like where did pre, for example, come from? I guess that's the container. Like
Because it's using a star as a reference.
no, yeah, I guess it's like the containers because you're matching in the middle. So anything that doesn't match the middle goes into pre and post, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's like a method when you put a star and then dot dot dot. Basically, whatever extra is moved into that. So it's
A bit
now the
difficult. I don't
pre
know.
supports
Yeah, we'll
that.
see.
Yeah. I guess it could be useful if you have like things you want to extract out from an array. I'm not sure it's supposed to hash, but yeah.
The post is more. I think the post POSD, that one is more used in Ruby, where if you have extra parameters after the main field, then yeah, the pre is new. Pre is new.
Hash accept is something that should have been there, I guess. Because the way you would do it now is you delete you dupe and you delete.
Yeah.
So basically it's h.dupe.delete what you don't want, and then that's the thing. If you want to preserve the original hash, right? Because this automatically does that. It preserves. It basically it creates a new hash
Yeah.
without this particular element.
I think this
So
this will be beneficial in immutable variable passing. So because you don't have to create a new object, so it saves in terms of memory.
I
Maybe.
mean, dot dupe is not that bad. It's a shallow copy, and then most likely it's a copy on write anyway. Like if you dupe it, it's almost zero cost in terms of memory footprint because you just create a new pointer to the same location in memory, right? It's the portions that change in your variable structure will be like different in terms of memory. So a copy on write, but this makes it easy. For example, if let's say in a Rails controller you glob in a lot of like parameters, but you don't want to pass the certain controller parameters to the creation of a record because the model does not handle, let's say, I don't know, like option, like a certain option, and then you don't want to like mess around with things. You still want to use that params hash, let's say, somewhere else in your
Yeah.
controller. So uh, this will be useful in those cases.
All right, memory view as an experimental feature.
Memory view.
I guess this is helpful for a lot of people doing memory related work.
No, this is used for memory mapped operations. Like because you can now get a certain portion of memory, and then now it's like an array, and then when you modify that particular buffer, let's say usually it's an array, but you modify that, it also reflects on on the memory of the actual machine. So it's like a direct memory access.
Right. Yeah, this is interesting.
So this is interesting because usually you don't want to share memory on concurrent programs because it's quite difficult to share memory. But and we've seen a lot of the concurrency paradigms, right? And a lot of them say, like especially a reactor, let's say, right? Like each of those reactors don't share memory because the easiest way to make sure that your program is thread safe is to not share memory. But then we have this as well, which is like specifically about sharing memory. So now you can have, when you do a memory map and it's being passed around different, let's say, threads, then you can have multiple threads modifying the memory. And then let's say you have a function to change a bitmap. Well, like because of the thing, right? You put it on memory. It's a huge bitmap, and so you want to partition the workers into how many cores you have. Let's say you have 12 cores, and then it will be like modifying of this bitmap will be shared amongst these 12 like processes, and so it becomes easier because they're going to be sharing the same memory. You don't like share the output. You don't carve a certain part of memory and then have pass it to this function and then get the result and then combine it again. So you're basically like tripling the memory requirements.
I think probably this is very related to the scheduler
Not
thing.
sure.
Could be.
See.
Let's see. Many performance improvements. See news in detail. Okay. Notable changes since 2.7. Keyword arguments. I think they stopped printing warning. I think. Feature of save completely removed. Now it's a normal global variable.
I don't probably use that. I don't think it's a best practice to use it anyway.
Backtrace have been reversed 2.5.
I
now
didn't
cancel.
notice it. I did not notice that, but I guess this will be an impact for like CI systems or like like logging and errors.
Probably
Because
debuggers
they
as
will
well.
need to know, yeah. Like if you are replicating a stack trace on your UI, then you need to know which is the actual error. Is it at the bottom or is it at the top?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. If those are doing ETL in terms of logging, yeah, then yeah, it's need to modify.
Yeah, standard library upgrades. No longer bundle days. Telnet and XML RPC. RS and ReXML is bundled. Promote standard library to default gems. Following default gems will publish. Okay. See news or commit log. Let's get the news. That was basically the pull request.
Right? Is that the last one?
What's the last one?
Like the last one on the entry, like for Ruby 3.0.
I think so. Is this master? Yeah. No, this is on the preview branch.
No, I
yeah, we
mean,
talk about
is the news the last item in that
Oh,
document
right.
that you were sharing?
Let's see. The rest is download links.
I think that's the last
Yeah,
one.
the trailer we talked about. And wait, it's a meme? Oh, mommy. Let's see, I think it covers more in detail what we're talking about, like the find pattern, endless definition. Oh, it's actually experimental. Okay. RBS.
So it's not finalized until we see the official tree, whether it will be included or not.
I
right?
think most likely it will lah. It's just like how stable is the feature probably. Yeah, it goes into a lot more detail. For example, all this scheduler stuff like kernel, the threads, right, scheduler, blocking join, fiber.
Omnitext is now Fiber.
Yeah, Rector, symbol, standard libraries. Yeah, this goes into more detail implementation, the just-in-time stuff. I think they were talking about the memory performances, so memory changes. Okay, looking forward to it. I think a lot of things are like I know for sure Rector is like still experimental even after release. So let's see. Yeah, I think this was a very nice session. I think we talked about 2020 as a whole and Ruby 3 as well. Any last things before we kind of close out with Keynote?
Well, are you upgrading any of your production systems to Ruby 3 when it goes out?
Nope. I guess so the trend I saw last year when 2.7 came out was a lot of things started supporting 2.7 by Valentine's Day. I think AWS dropped that they were supporting Lambda for 2.7 in around Valentine's. So I guess it's probably then. Like a lot of the gems and the libraries will be like, yeah, we'll, I don't know, yeah.
They're not probably updated for 3.0.
But it
How
doesn't.
about you, Gui?
For my project, will most likely move to 3 next year. Will be because
Which
we
part of
want
next year? First quarter?
first quarter probably not, because first quarter we will be launching the product. We want it to be stable, so most likely no. But second quarter, when we have the first version, then the second version will be 3, because we want to go for bleeding edge. It's better to go for the latest, right? When you move to new product, then you start supporting that. So most likely we'll go for 3 and then see Rails 6 supports most of it or not. Yeah, if we're using Rails 6.
All right.
I guess this was a wonderful session. I guess we can go ahead and close this.
Yeah, you have like the quiz, right?
Yep, I was gonna talk about that. So we are giving away 3 RubyMine licenses. So this is the form. I think we can share the link through the comments as well. Let me share it real quick. So how are you able to get this license? Is we actually created a Google form. So should I show the form?
Yeah, since
Sure,
already
go ahead.
Right, so we asked some very simple questions in the form. So we need your contact details and some more information about, hey, describe Ruby, some quizzes around that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick up randomly 3 submissions. Of course, like some of these answers you need to have it correct before you can filter it out. Right, but we're gonna keep this form open for a week until end of next Tuesday. And so from there, we'll filter out accordingly and we'll randomly pick 3. So we announce it through Facebook and Slack later once we have the. So I guess what we will do is we'll probably just share the email addresses. No, maybe what we'll do is we'll just say it's concluded and we'll email each of them separately. Yeah, for the license details and all. But yeah, so anyone's interested, yeah, go to the form.
This is a full license, right? This is not a trial license or whatever.
Yeah, it's a 1-year license for RubyMine specifically, not for other projects. It's just RubyMine.
If you already have a license, can you use the free license to renew your current license because it's already expired?
I remember you can. So for that case, means if you are already existing JetBrains account, um,
Mm-hmm.
you can reply to the email that send you if you win, that send you the license and ask um, questions about upgrading. Because
Mm-hmm.
I know that this is for most likely works for new purchases. For
Mm-hmm.
upgrades, um, I have uh, feedback before previously in Penang where it doesn't work correctly. It should
Mm-hmm.
work, but it doesn't work correctly for that particular member. So
Mm-hmm.
if um, anyone have any issue redeeming that code when you win, can email back. Yeah.
All right.
All right, sounds good. Let's see. All right, that's about it. Yeah, I did didn't adjust that properly. It's been a wonderful 2020. I think definitely like moving to being remote and even doing like code cleaning remotely was definitely an experience. I think we'll still do a lot of similar things next year. But if anyone have any suggestions or what you'd like to see more of, or maybe some things that you didn't enjoy, right? Always reach out through Slack or talk about this. Yeah, and we're always looking for speakers, right? So if anyone's interested in speaking, always let's see. There is a let me drag Slack out. Um, there is a Slack channel called Ruby Tuesday CFP, right? So if you're interested to give a talk, like, hey, definitely feel free to drop the topic that you'd like to talk about, and you'll be included in the next Ruby Tuesday.
The next meetup is on the 5th of January, right?
Let's see, first Tuesday. Yes, you'll be on the 5th.
Yeah. So we'll all see you again on the 5th next year.
Yeah,
All
the
If
right.
you
new
have someone something to talk about, then yeah, just ask to
yeah,
ask in this channel. Then we'll make sure that you have the time and preparation you needed.
correct. And if you are interested in joining, basically help to organize some of the Ruby meetups or code clinics, do leave a message in either a YouTube channel or a Facebook channel. Yeah, so that we know and we'll try to get in touch with you. Appreciate all the feedbacks. So I think happy holidays, early happy holiday.
Happy Ruby 3 release.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, yep,
All
yep.
right. I guess that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
We'll
See you
see
next
everyone
one.
next year. Bye.